Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Maximizing Efficiencies, Readiness, and Asset Management in DoD, sponsored by Infor on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today, Colonel Kerry George, the Deputy Director of Maintenance Policy and Programs at the Army, Colonel Marlon Crook, the Deputy Director for the National Guard Bureau for CIO J6 Directorate, Mark Fox, the Senior Manager for Global Defense Programs at Amazon Web Services, and Risa Savold, the Technical Director at Infor for Federal and DoD Solutions. Now, before break, we started talking a little bit about this idea of data, and I think Colonel Crook, you brought up the fact that the National Guard Bureau is bringing in a chief data officer and really trying to get data into dashboards to have a more, if you will, holistic view. It's one of those buzzword bingo games I think we play is when people say that. But let me turn to Mark Fox from Amazon for a second. Mark, talk a little bit about this idea of transformation. It's not just happening at the National Guard Bureau, it's not just happening at the Army, it's really happening across all of government.
Correct, yeah, it's very purple. In fact, it's even on the international military agencies as well. It's sort of, where do you start with the challenge? First is the acknowledgement that there's a problem, which we've kind of done that. The second piece is, what do we do first? And there's some organizational changes that we're seeing consistently. You're seeing titles like Chief Data Officer, Chief Digital Officer, Head of Digital Transformation across the board in almost every one of the MILDEPs and DoD and others. So I think, that will be the first step. And in the meetings that we're having with the people that are in those roles, they're starting out with a very holistic view, looking at some things that we talked about before, which is a combination of, what is the current state? What is the data? What are the data sources that are available? Where are they? Again, typically very siloed within particular weapon systems and departments. And then sort of walking through that process of once I know what and where the data is, how do I bring it back? You deal with the data cleansing challenges, the data management problems that ultimately lead you to that end goal here, which I think we're going to dig into a little bit deeper here, which is you have to have that information, that historical data, to ever get to the point to be predictive, to ever be able to do machine learning and artificial intelligence. So, I see that there's an acknowledgement, the positions are being filled, and we're heading down the right path.
Do you think that this is much different than it was 3, 5, 7 years ago? Because we've been talking about electronic government, I love that term still, for the better part of 20 years almost. And there was a recognition of we need, if you remember the 3 clicks to service, which was from the early days of the Bush administration, and the Obama administration had a digital strategy. So we've seen this building up. Do you think this is what it's basically coming to a head?
I do, and I would say the evidence of that is if we look outside into the commercial world. The IT capabilities that are there today, these enabling technologies, I think have crossed that threshold from being able to do effective analytics within a unit level, that they could handle that in the past, that we now have the ability to ingest and move. The networks continue to get better and bigger. They'll always need to get bigger. I'm sure the gentleman here would always want more bandwidth from the edge. But that ability to bring it in, to put these things beyond just the traditional data warehouses and move them into things like data lakes, which again become a precursor to start to do that predictive artificial intelligence machine learning. So I do think we crossed a threshold.
Colonel Crook, jump in as well, because there's the big DoD transformation strategy. You guys are following that to a certain extent, right?
Sure, and also being the National Guard, we have this unique status where we actually have our traditional guardsmen in their day-to-day life that are actually embedded in private industry. So where the chief is big on leveraging partnerships, so they bring that back into our services and our day-to-day, like this is what they're seeing new, and the chief is big on innovation and incorporating that. And he's also, the National Guard, along with his services, are fully supporting the Department of Defense Chief Information Officers digital modernization strategy, which also supports the National Defense Strategy and the CIO's 4 priorities of cloud, artificial intelligence, cyber, and C3, which is command, control, and communications. So with that, it's going to improve the National Guard's ability for data, supporting data, and their response with increased reliability, performance, ability to rapidly adapt to changing environments. So we're trying to stay current, we're trying to stay innovative, and we do that, one, with our unique status, with our folks embedded in industry, and with leveraging partnerships.
Yeah, and it's the embedded industry piece, which is something that, Colonel and I were even talking beforehand, that he and I had crossed paths before in his involvement in programs like SecDef Corporate Fellows, where I think DoD continues to do a better job of bringing folks into large commercial organizations, seeing what is the realm of the possible, and then bringing that back, whether they're soldier citizens on the Guard side or active duty folks who will spend in some cases up to a year inside of commercial organizations and bring that back when they're in uniform again.
And in fact, I think there was a program that DoD is just kicking off to have that industry exchange as well, so that they really see the value in that. And I think that plays into what Colonel Crook was saying about the people who have a real job, so to speak, in the private sector and then do their reservist time as well. This push to this CDO, this idea of understanding the digital transformation, I think that's been enabled. The underneath reason is the cloud, and we talked a little bit about the cloud. I think, Colonel George, you brought up this idea of moving like the CBM to the cloud. You talked about some other things. Let's start there without getting into the bits and bytes on your end, but what does that mean to you? Why is the cloud changing the way you look at logistics?
It raises it above the tactical level. So as mentioned earlier, BCTs know what's going on with their formation, but the Army doesn't necessarily see what's happening across the entire fleet. Is it a systemic problem that's happening with the weapons system that needs to be addressed across the Army? Or are there conditions that are changing that we need to review how we're maintaining that equipment? The cloud gives us that ability to see across the entire Army, not just what's inside your formation, that report that's coming up on that individual commander's dashboard. As our data repositories grow, mature, we start getting the data that really helps us start making truly informed decisions. Tracking everything down to the serialized or the batch number of a part. So rather than putting out a maintenance message that said, okay, everybody check your 50 caliber machine gun to see if this piece has a crack. Well, now you go, okay, these serial numbers of 50 cals need to be checked because we're able to track we'd be able to track those parts down to the discrete part that there's a problem with, because we know the batch, we know the weapons they went into. Tracking those life cycle changes and all the way from inception all the way to disposition services at the end.
I heard a great example just recently about the Air Force and the challenge they had with if a plane needed a new part, there was something like 15 or 16 different systems they had to check, and then also jump into whether it's UPS or FedEx or the Postal Service to send the part. And I think there was a big goal, it's very similar to what you think you're describing with the 50 caliber machine gun, is can we just know where the part exists and can we just move the part very quickly? I think that's just probably the nirvana in some ways.
Yeah, and I think what I'm really hoping to see out of it, and I think what DoD would like to see, is help us make those decisions. What is that next best action? Tell us, is it UPS, FedEx, or DHL? What is the best way to get this here, rather than going into each of those systems and saying, okay, this is going to get here Monday, this is going to get here Tuesday, this is going to get here Friday. Tell us which one's the best. Don't make us do the research. Figure it out, and give us point us in the right direction.
All right, Mark, I got to bring you in on this. We're talking cloud. AWS invented the cloud. All right, I won't go there. But talk a little bit about just where the cloud fits into this broader discussion too.
Yeah, I think listening to what the Colonel's talking about there, in my mind, I immediately go to the e-commerce side of big Amazon, and we're fortunate that it's one large homogeneous organization. And what we're able to do is exactly what the nirvana is, which is we generally know where every product is, which warehouse it's in, down to the bin that it's in, to automatically when that order comes in, Jason, if you order something and it's prime, it's going to determine is the best way, us, UPS, Postal Service. So the good part is that the proof there on the commercial side is there. Now the challenge is how do you bridge that gap into the military organizations? It's not that easy, but the fact is that it can be done. And cloud is really the enabler that is under the covers of that, because again, I go back to those basic tenets of it, which is that ability to ingest the massive amounts of data, process, which is really the challenge here. When that question comes in, your 50 cal part, which is okay, who ordered them, when did they order them, where did they go, where are they now, and then ultimately if it needs to be replaced, automatically determining what's the best method of shipping. So, I think people that are in uniform see, because they go home and they're using capabilities, online e-commerce, and they see the realm of the possible. How do we bridge the gap between what we're able to do in commercial and bring those things into the military?
All right, just promise me it's not going to have, if you fix this 50 caliber machine gun, you may also want to fix, your M16. It's not going to be like that, right?
Let's hope not.
I hope not. All right. Risa, jump into the conversation, because when we talk technology, talk cloud a little bit, that's leading us down a path as well, not just to, hey, we'll put everything in the cloud, but the tools, the data analytics, everything that sits on top of the cloud. Are you starting to see that from government and other customers that, hey, they're discovering the art of what the possible?
Absolutely. I think digital transformation is now a much more exciting topic than it used to be. In government, the original drivers are to reduce cost, improve cybersecurity, modernize newer IT architectures, come up with user interfaces that are easier to use, more attractive to our younger service members. But really, I think it's setting a foundation for these emerging technologies that will really accelerate capability for us. And those include artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotic process automation. But those technologies are all pointing towards the same thing. They're all pointing towards automation. And to really integrate that into our business processes, whether it's logistics or maintenance, you really have to trust that system, what it's doing, what kinds of decisions it's making for you. And that goes back to the data problem again.
Yeah, jumping.
So that's been one of our challenges in logistics since the beginning of time. For a while, we wanted to get to just-in-time logistics, and it really came down to we didn't have a trust in the system. We didn't have a trust in the process. So a commander didn't think something was coming fast enough, so they would override or they would order another one just to make sure it got there. So as we start developing that trust and that confidence, and we see data actually working and delivering things when and where it's supposed to be, we'll start seeing some culture shifts. And then helping us make those decisions, like the Army's undertaking additive manufacturing, as most of the services are. So how do we use that, and how do we use the data to determine whether it's best to make that piece or whether it's best to buy that piece? Whether the cost factors, the shipping time, the availability, do we have a mature supply system? But without that data helping us make those decisions, the default is order it again, override, anything to get it here faster for me without the impacts of understanding what it does to the broader logistics enterprise.
All right, Colonel Crook?
So as it pertains to the National Guard, the American public, our mission partners, FEMA, state and local, our mission partners depend readily on the Guard and their rapid response. So advancements in AI and cloud computing provide that connective tissue that will enhance our time of response across the 54 states and territories. A real life example, the California wildfires, a big thing. It's becoming, unfortunately, a reoccurring occurrence. The California National Guard is piloting an AI enhanced solution that helps with fire line detection and digital imagery.
That's actually really interesting, because it's those pilots, and that was actually my next question. Are we seeing some pilots? Maybe Colonel George, since Colonel Crook gave us one of his examples, is there a pilot somewhere you can talk to?
So there's a pilot that I'm working on, hasn't started yet, working on getting the approval and the funding for it, but how we modernize how we deliver our clothing bag items to our trainees, and it's very much going to be cloud-based, data-driven. So in our current process, a trainee comes into the Army, and they spend about 2 days out of their eight weeks of basic training being issued uniforms. They'll get some issued the first night, they'll get more pieces issued the next day, and then they'll get their service uniforms issued a little bit closer to graduation. But that adds up to about 2 days worth of time, money, resources. So we're looking at how can we connect the data of that recruit, their information, their sizing at MEPS using an automated sizing technology or manual sizing, connecting their sizing and when they're going to actually arrive and where they're going to arrive. So instead of having these large warehouses of equipment at each of our installations, just in case, it starts being fulfilled from a national level, arriving 24 hours before the recruit does. They show up, get everything at one time. We give two days worth of training time back to the Army to focus on potentially higher priorities.
It seems so simple, but there's so much that goes into it, because otherwise it's all being handwritten. You walk in, you say, okay, how tall are you? What's your waist size? Let's measure you. Then all the data's got to be put somewhere, and then that's the time you're talking to. If you could automate that, as Risa said, that just makes things happen more quickly, and then you get that training days back.
Absolutely. I've spent the last 2 weeks traveling to 3 out of the 4 basic training locations, and nuanced differences in each location. And their processes are they're efficient for what they have, the location, the facilities, and the time they're given, and the resources. But each one of them is slightly different. So how do we pull those 3 or 4 different processes into a single one and make that shift and that mentality to where they have the trust that when their sizes are taken to the basic training, they're validated up until the day they ship, that when they pick up their bag, everything's going to fit. Because part of that is if I stop and have to try everything on again, well, I'm taking that time back that I intended to save. But it comes with confidence, it comes with building, sometimes running the models, the demonstrations, running parallel processes to say, I'm predicting you're going to be this size, and when you actually get issued, I predicted that was the size they were going to tell you. Yeah, do that enough times and there would be confidence in the system.
And I think that's key. Risa, one of the big things I imagine that you see when you talk to customers is that confidence. Start small, let's do a proof of concept, prove it works, and then we can move on. Is that the conversation you're having with customers?
Absolutely. We love collaborating with the government. One of the interesting things that we've been doing a lot are these other transaction authorities, these other partnerships to do pilots and prototypes with the DoD. Another thing that is really important to us is something Colonel Crook mentioned earlier, was that need for both flexibility and agility. So as a software provider with a custom software solution, you're getting the ultimate flexibility. Theoretically, we tell computers what to do, but that's not going to be particularly agile. If a new requirement comes up or you want to change your business process, that can take a lot of time to change your software, and there's a greater possibility that you'll introduce errors with that new source code. So we put a lot of effort into systems that focus on configuration, not customization, to accelerate capability for you.
I think that's a great point. Configuration, not being so prescriptive to be able to be able to change and have that flexibility. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the panel discussion, Maximizing Efficiencies, Readiness, and Asset Management in DoD, sponsored by Infor on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.